Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Zach, along with my co-host Sully,
Hello, how y'all doing?
and this is the Pigskin Prognosis Divisional weekend. We've had a very exciting wild card weekend. Now we're looking forward to the four remaining games in the eight remaining teams. Four games left this weekend. Pushing forward into the championship weekend, and then of course the Pro Bowl break. So we'll talk about the four remaining games, or the four games I should say for the divisional weekend. How some teams got there, and then we'll also talk about some draft picks, um, as well as some head coach flip flops and some drama brewing around some head coaches, getting let go and not all being allowed to interview with certain teams. So we thank you all for joining. Sit back, relax, and hopefully we can keep your interest over the next hour talking about football stuff. And if there's anything that you would like us to talk about in the future, feel free to comment down below and give us some more talking points, and some if you have any questions or anything like that, let us know. But yeah, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started.
Fuck yeah.
All right, so we're into the divisional round, Sully. We've had all the games are wrapped up right now. The As we record, the Rams are currently beating the Vikings, and I foresee that game to finish with the Rams beating Minnesota and moving on to play Philadelphia. So we had six games this weekend. We had
Mhm.
six teams knocked out, a couple of upsets. I think a couple of teams that I had anticipated to move on, Minnesota being one of them, aren't moving on. Minnesota, Tampa Bay, to name another team, and I want to get your opinion on how you thought the wild card weekend kind of set up the what's the word I'm looking for, the upsetting.
Precedents.
Yeah, the precedence is a good word for it, for the remaining playoffs roster and schedule.
I mean, that's a good, interesting take on it. I didn't really feel like many of the games were really competitive. I know the Steelers Ravens game, was 28-14. So on paper, that looks competitive. But if you ended up watching the game, it really wasn't. Obviously, the Bills game smacking the shit out of the Broncos 31-7. And then, you had the Commanders game last night, or no, I guess 2 nights ago, but a night ago as of the recording. That came down to that last second. What'd you call it in our group chat? The
I
divisional
called it a
doink?
divisional doink. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
what they
it's
called
what
it
I,
on
on
TV. So I liked it.
yeah, and I like that too. So yeah, the divisional doink. It's always entertaining watching the Commanders, just because I feel like it's either they get the shit smacked out of them, or it comes down to like some shit like that, and or like a last minute Hail Mary, against the Bears,
Yeah,
shit
yeah,
like that. So it's always entertaining to watch. I love to see a rookie go, that far in, especially getting his first playoff win in his rookie season. Plus, he's an Arizona State alum. Granted, he ended up graduating from LSU, but still started off at ASU. But yeah, no, just to answer the question, it as far as all the games go and how I think they're going to set the precedence for the rest of the postseason, the two teams that I'm the most interested in seeing play didn't play this weekend, with being the
okay.
Lions and the Chiefs. To be honest with you, Chiefs. I know we've, or at least I've been very vocal about my disdain for that team. Um, Throughout pretty much every podcast I think since we've started this. So with how lackluster they looked on offense, their defense has looked fantastic. I'm just interested in seeing like how well they're going to come out having. I think they have 21 or 24 days off since like the last time like all the starters played, since they played that three back-to-back games within like 11 days right around Christmas time,
Yeah.
and they rested their starters last week. So I'll be interested in seeing how they come out and fare against Houston, since they're playing them Saturday at like what, 3:30 I think Eastern
Yeah.
time.
4:30 Eastern. Yeah.
4:30 Eastern. Yeah, it's a home game for the Chiefs. It's always tough to go into Arrowhead and win games and stuff. And I don't know, Texans looked damn good against the Chargers last week, like impressively good.
Yeah, 4 interceptions against Justin Herbert was not
Yeah,
something I was not expecting at all. But
which against a dude who didn't throw that many the whole season, let alone to throw that in one game. So
right,
that'll be interesting. And then Detroit should be. There's rumors that David Montgomery's coming back. One half of Sonic and Knuckles. So it'll be interesting seeing how he comes back, and hopefully, there's rumors too they'll get a couple more. There's key defensive players back too for Detroit to help them out, and obviously a little bit better off than let's say Kansas City was. They don't have, all their guys haven't been rested as long as they did, since they played Week 18 against Minnesota. That a game that was for the first round bye and for the division, so they actually had a lot more to play for than Kansas City. So they're not as much rest, but I mean, like we talked about last week, we can't college football playoffs and stuff. Every team that had a playoff or a bye lost. So hopefully it's not a repeat of the same thing unless it's Kansas City. But I think it'll be interesting. Some of the matchups do interest me. Lions versus Washington. That should be, I'm hoping, a good game. I think the Lions have the more explosive offense. The key thing I think that's going to be the determining factor for that game is going to be Jaden Daniels running. I think.
yeah.
Eagles against whether it's the Rams or Vikings. I genuinely think the Eagles win that game anyway, especially in fucking Philly. And then that final game is, other than basically both night games, Saturday, Sunday, are the ones I'm looking forward to the most. And then the final one being the Ravens and Bills. They played earlier in the season, and it was a good game. I'm hoping to see the same thing again. Bills being at home is another hard team to beat, and they seem like they're rolling at the right time. They steamrolled Denver's defense, which has been a top 5. I think they ended up finishing top 3 overall all season. So it'll be interesting to see how well the Bills can handle the Ravens, with Lamar, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, and Derrick Henry's fucking ass in the backfield. So
Yeah.
it'll but yeah, no, I think this does kind of give us a little bit of a insight a little bit to, but none of the teams that I think that I don't know, none of the games really have been super interesting except last night's game or the Sunday night game. But I mean, so again, I've kind of beaten around the bush on this question a little bit, but I don't really think it showed us much precedence other than I think the best teams. I think we actually, at least one of the best teams we haven't seen play.
So let me ask you this then. Moving forward, now that we've had, the Chargers knocked out, the Steelers are knocked out, the Broncos, I think, was probably the biggest game. Not expecting them to, to win, but I was expecting it to be a lot closer of a game. Mm-hmm. And then, the Packers are knocked out and the Bucks knocked out. Out of the teams that are gone, so those are 5, and then we'll go ahead and count out the Vikings as well. Out of the 6 teams that were eliminated, which one do you think had the best chance moving up through the schedule and to potentially play in the Super Bowl, if not win the Super Bowl?
So the teams that were eliminated, I mean,
because personally, I really thought the Broncos would do a lot better than they did. Yeah, it's a 31-7 final score, but I was expecting it to be more of a mid to late season showing of Joe Burrow, of Bo Nix than it was the early season. Remember how he, the earlier off in the season he struggled to throw a touchdown in the first 4 weeks or something like that, and it's just not who he was going into the wild card game. Was just not himself. So I mean, he threw one touchdown early in the first quarter, and they never scored again. They never scored again. Not field goal, not safety, not touchdown, nothing. So,
yeah, I think that one was just surprising too because I expected more from the defense. Like like I was saying, top 3 defense all season, and you allow 31 points. Yeah, against a team that I feel like the Bills have got the momentum going for them right now. But I would say I think the team that I felt could have had the most going for them was the Chargers. And I'm not just saying that because I'm stationed in, near the LA, San Diego area. But the reason I think that is because of the fact that they're often, I mean, J.K. Dobbins, and their running backfield all former Ravens and stuff. I know they couldn't stay healthy. They did all right this year as far as health wise. But that's Jim Harbaugh's like specialty. Like, hey, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, make it easy for your quarterback, basically just some chip shots. Lad McConkey had over 100 yards like by halftime or something in that game.
Yeah.
Like it was ridiculous. I think he had like 108 going in a half. So
he almost had a 200-yard game, yeah.
Yeah, and then he broke off for like 82 yards for a touchdown too, on top of like in the third or fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So I expected, based on just how Harbaugh coaches, that was going to be the mentality of like, okay, we're going to go in here, we're going to do what we've been doing all year, not turning the ball over, and that momentum I figured was going to ride up until maybe not the Super Bowl, just because it seems like the Chargers have a hard time beating the Chiefs, mostly because it's probably a divisional game. They see each other twice a year. But I think they, out of who got eliminated, I think they would have had the best chance, I think, to potentially go that full distance.
Okay.
Just because of the way Harbaugh runs everything, it's easy on the quarterback to go through and not make mistakes because of it. You're not going to win the game turning the ball over 5 times or 4 or 5 times. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I think that there was only one game this year that a team turned a ball over 5 times and still won, and I think it was the Saints against the Panthers, if I'm not mistaken.
Wasn't it Detroit?
Maybe it was a Detroit game too. I remember the Saints did something crazy like that. But you're right. The point of my comment was you're more than likely not going to win a game. And I say more than likely, I would say 99.9% chance you are not going to win the game if you turn the ball over, if you lose the turnover battle while losing the game as well. And not only that, but you turned the ball over. You were intercepted 4 times. I mean, these aren't like fumbles, right? Like this isn't just something that like, okay, I made a bad throw. He made the catch, but he got, hit real hard. No, that is the quarterback making a bad decision with the ball, making the bad throw, making a poor read. So,
yeah, I would say that there was one throw on that came from Herbert that was tipped by the receiver, which I get what you're saying too, but yeah, more often than not, yeah, if you're making, hell, even then you still threw 3 picks. If that's the case, you still turn the ball over 3 times, even if you discredit that one where it was tipped. But yeah, you're not going to go out there and win fucking football games that way. It's just not in the NFL. It's just not going to happen. So
yeah, I agree. And we haven't really seen. I would say, I mean, that game was very turnover heavy, but aside from that, we didn't see a lot of crazy turnover battles. Like I think they said it. There was a quote that Tony Romo, or not Romo, whoever the fucking guy that co-hosts with the guy that we don't like on ESPN. The fuck is his name? I can't think of his name. Anyways,
yeah,
he said that playoffs is not about who makes the biggest plays. It's about which team makes the fewest mistakes, right? And so, yeah, you can have a team that makes a bunch of big plays, but if they're also making a bunch of mistakes, then the other team, if they're playing fundamental football, they're holding onto the ball, they're making smart decisions. In Minnesota's cases, in Sam Darnold's cases, they're staying in the pocket or making the throw quickly. They're not holding onto the ball. Those are the teams that are going to make it close. They may not win just because the other team may still have more talent, but they may make it close. And if you are not a team that has a lot of talent in the let's look at, I don't want to say the Chargers don't have talent, but they're a younger team, right?
they're not stacked.
Running backs, right? Same with, I mean, I would even say the Commanders, rookie, really young team, rookie quarterback, and
rookie wide receiver,
right? Just those guys need to stick to their fundamental football because they're going to get, in some cases, they're going to get outskilled by, look at the other team, look at who the Commanders were playing. The Buccaneers. You got a veteran quarterback, veteran wide receiver, veteran tight end, veteran running back, a rookie running back, veteran defense, like all those guys, but they still won it because they stuck to their fundamentals. And then now you got the Chargers, a team that, again, I mean, and I would even argue too that Texas, or, the Texans, I always call them Texas, but the Texans are, again, another rookie team, young team, and and you're making, you hear whenever someone talks about the run that they could go on because of how young that team is. There's another 2 or 3 year potential for them to make the playoffs and maybe even a deep playoff run, just because of how young this team is. That they're not going to have to exchange a lot of players over the next couple of years. It's just sticking to that fundamental football. And I would expect that Justin Herbert, I believe he's been in longer than C.J. Stroud, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
I think
Herbert's
he's
on
been
his
in
like
for like
fifth year.
yeah, I was gonna say, I think he was like 5 or 6 years in, and Stroud's on his third year. This will be the end of the second year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and you got, and it seems like Stroud has developed really well over time, in those two full regular seasons, along with his rookie receiving core and his head coach and people like that.
Losing Stephon Diggs and stuff pretty early in the trade.
Right, and then it's just kind of like the adaptability on it too, right? You got Stephon Diggs, sure, he's a great wide receiver, but he also brings in that expertise off the field that you can help. Maybe you're not playing, but you can help guide the younger players. You can help guide, the running backs or the wide receivers on certain catches or what to do with the ball and how to just be, play smart with the ball.
Yeah, and then that playoff experience too helps being on the Bills.
It does, and I think that you do get some of that with on the Charger side, because you got to look back at Harbaugh's career. He was an NFL playoff coach. Back when he coached with San Francisco, he made a run all the way up to the Super Bowl and ultimately lost to his brother in Baltimore. So the experience and the coaching staff is there, albeit I don't want to say that it's all come back at once. It's just in his case, in Jim Harbaugh's case, maybe he's got a young team. He needs more than 1 year to fully develop that fundamental push into the playoffs, right? Because when you get into those key moments, right, like everybody, and I guess I could say this for everybody listening, me included, we've all played sports at one point or another in our lifetime, right? And if you haven't, then you've got some kind of memory where, whether it's
Zach doesn't want to say if you haven't, then this conversation doesn't apply to you.
Well, no, I was going to say, there's something in your life where you can relate to this when I say this. Is there's a point where you need to clutch up, right? Whether it's sport related or not, right? But for the purpose of clutching up in a playoff game, it's a little bit different than a regular season game. You need to really focus on what you were trained to do, how much you've practiced to do the same thing over and over again. And that just didn't show for Justin Herbert because, like you said, he had not thrown a lot of interceptions throughout the year. And it's just so uncharacteristic for him to throw 4 picks in a game that mattered the most. And almost like he was trying to do too much when he didn't have to do too much at all. Like all he had to do was get the ball to Lad McConkey and he did the rest,
Yeah.
So, and it's tough to say, oh, they're just mistakes, whatever. It's easier to say it's not your fault when there are 4 fumbles. It's easy to spread the blame and say he had a fumble, this other guy had a fumble. But when the quarterback throws 4 interceptions, it's pretty easy to point the finger and say you were the problem, and this is why we lost the game, right?
You're a real problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I agree with you in saying that the Chargers did have a lot of talent and just didn't stick to the fundamentals. So,
and speaking of the Texans, what are your thoughts on CJ Stroud? I know he had that phenomenal rookie year last year, and it seems, and the reason I bring this up is we were talking about him, but everyone had that debate, especially in the beginning of this season too, the whole CJ Stroud Bryce Young thing. We see how benching Bryce Young ended up benefiting him, thus far up until that last little bit in I think it was the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season. I think it was the last 4 weeks. Carolina ranked offensive touchdowns were 3rd total touchdown, like offensive touchdowns.
Yeah.
So do you think, and it seems Stroud kind of, granted it's hard to come off that rookie year that he had last year. Yes, Tank Dell, receiver injuries aside, how do you? I'm trying to think of how to word this. How do you see CJ Stroud coming back next year as far as fantasy and just as a player in general, as far as like, can he lead the team to a playoff win, another playoff win, potentially? Obviously, we don't know how next week's going to go, but let's say they lose, hypothetically, is that going to benefit him next season?
Okay, so I'm going to look at this as like a two-part question. CJ Stroud, in my mind, as an individual player, is still developing. He's a young player, but he is making all the right steps towards his progress, right? I'm going to kind of go off a little bit here, but anybody in the NFL, anybody in any sport is always making a development to be a better player. You're never at your peak, right? CJ Stroud has taken exponential steps to get there quicker than other rookies in his draft class have and are currently. And I think that is something that he has going for him as an individual player. So coming back to your question about like fantasy value and stuff for him specifically, yes, I think that he is going to make a bigger impact next year with the team, regardless of his weapons that he has on offense in the receiving core or as a running back. The second part of my answer would be as a team, would be as a whole. And that kind of answers your question about making another playoff run. I think that, to kind of go back to what I was just talking about, how young that team is, you have Nico Collins, Tank Dell, you have Stephon Diggs, who his future's uncertain right now with the Texans, but he's kind of hinted that it may not end. He may sign another contract with them, or he may explore other options. But if he goes, okay, so what? You've still got Tank Dell and Nico Collins at least. And those guys, that offensive core as a whole unit, if they can stay healthy, that's the key thing about staying healthy. I think that they can make a great playoff run and potentially even look at being a number 1 seed next year, because you have a aging Chiefs. You have an aging Chiefs lineup, right? Travis Kelce, this year his productivity was, just astronomically low compared to his average years. The Chiefs, yeah, they won and they were the number 1 seed. They won a lot of their games, but just barely. And we've talked about that a lot on this podcast in previous weeks, where they were squeaking by to get a win, whether it was on a blocked field goal or some miracle interception or some, false start call, whatever the case is. I watched a video a couple weeks ago that explained that instead of being, what was their overall record, like 15-2, they should have been like 8-7 or something like that. Or
yeah, I did see that, but yeah, 8-9 or whatever. Yeah, but
so, and just barely above 500. I'll give them the credit. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I do think that they are a above 500 team, maybe even a 10-win team, but a 15-win team is a little bit of a stretch for a team that had a lack of offensive production in their weapons. Their quarterback just does his quarterback things, but his receivers, his running backs, they don't do much. Defense were, making big plays, but letting easy plays get by them throughout the year. So, take them off of their throne. The only other real competition that they have in the AFC would be the Bills. I don't really know that the Bills are going to continue on that path of production, if you will. I keep using that word production, but what I mean when I say that is scoring points, right? You're making stops and your defense is being quick to get off the field, and your offense is scoring points, which is a key thing, right? You're not going to win games unless you score, but on the defensive side of things too, you can give up some points and still win ball games, right? But yeah, I think that the Texans have a real chance, if they can develop and stay healthy, to potentially be a number 1 seed next year.
Interesting. Everybody write that down so that when Zach's wrong next season, we can discuss it.
Well, and the other, really the only point that I like to make is that we talked about it I say we, but before this podcast was a thing, I talked about it with a couple of my buddies. The Texans are one of the only teams that you can definitively talk about their future because of how many rookies that they have and how good they are now, right? CJ Stroud, he's still got 2 more years left on his rookie contract. Nico Collins and Tank Dell, same thing. And then you got whoever they draft as well, right? Let's say the Texans draft another wide receiver. Doubtful, but they might. Or a solid running back. Or if they flip it and go on to the defensive side of things, maybe a cornerback or a safety that they need. Now you're looking at a team that's developing young players that are rookies that are going to be with that team for 4+ years, and that they're gonna stay there because they're cheap, right? And that's a big thing that a lot of teams kind of overlook is youth development. I call them youth, but they're not. They're not.
They're grown ass men, but
right?
yeah.
They are, yeah, absolutely grown ass men. It could break me in half, but in the world of NFL, they're young, right? They're rookies. They're just popped into the scene. But if you could pull someone with that raw talent like they have in C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell, then there's not much more to develop. You don't have to worry about the fundamentals. It's more of the working together as a team, focusing more on the special plays and really breaking out of that potential that they have to unlock their full potential, I guess. I keep thinking of it. Can't think of a different fucking word. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with that. So the Texans are one of the few teams right now that you can definitively talk about their future because they're not going to do the scatter of off season when people are on 1-year deals and they go sign with another team, or you draft somebody and then someone else wants out because you drafted someone to take their spot. Things like that. So,
all right. Again, everybody write that down when Zach's wrong next season.
yeah,
you heard him say it. Texans are going to be the number 1 seed.
I said they could be. So if
you said they will be.
I mean, I would staying healthy. I would put money on it. But maybe we can add that into the shitty bets of the week this week.
This off season.
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay. All right. So next week's games. And then we'll go over my favorite segment. Unless you want to do my favorite segment now, it's up to you. I'll let you pick.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's break into them now. Well, and I say I only have 3 picks for you so far because I don't know who the 4th pick is going to be. But
I mean, there's 2 minutes. There's 2 minutes left in this game. All right, so we got to do the typical intro to this. So it's my favorite segment of the week. You all know it. It's ZSBOTTW. If you don't know, if you're new to the channel and don't know what that is, that's Zach's shitty bets of the week, where we have our very own. Zach, give us
shitty bets,
parlay or whatever, whatever the hell he ends up putting together. But yeah, as the name entitles, shitty bets. So if you want to lose your money, go ahead and listen to Zach.
Yeah. So okay, I'm going to start off this week's shitty bet segment by saying I'm absolutely devastated with the choices that I made last week because, yeah, it did not go well. As we talked about at the very beginning of this, there was a lot of upsets that I was not expecting, and yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. So I lost $10 last week, but hey, we can make it up this week maybe.
Hopefully.
So there's only 4 games. I'm gonna put picks together for all 4 of them. I don't know. I will say this is the one week that I'm going to give you 4 bets, but I don't know the complete odds because the 4th team is not finalized yet, and it's not in. I use DraftKings for my odds, but I'll give you the 3-leg parlay and tell you what the 4th leg would be, and we'll go from there. So to start, the first bet for the first game of the week would be the Texans at the Chiefs. I have the Texans covering the 7.5-point spread against the Chiefs. Right now, the spread is plus 7.5 in favor of the Chiefs. So the Chiefs are 7.5-point favorites. I think that the Texans can at least cover that spread, which means that they will lose by 7 points or less or win the game outright. The odds for that one are minus 105. The second game of the weekend is the Commanders at Detroit. And this one is kind of a surprising spread for me. The Commanders are the underdogs at 9.5. I was expecting them after having some kind of game like that against Tampa Bay that the odds would be a little bit more so in the favor of the Commanders. Not to be favorites, but to be not as big of an underdog. But I have them covering that spread at 9.5, meaning I think that the Commanders are going to lose by no more than 9 points, or that the Commanders will just outright win against the Lions. The odds for that one are -112. And then my third pick in my right now 3-pick parlay are the Buffalo Bills. Oh, stand by. My fourth one just popped up because the game is pretty much over. But we'll get to that in a second. My third pick is the Buffalo Bills hosting the Ravens. The Bills are actually the underdog, believe it or not, at home. Which I don't think is going to stand. So I'm going to pick the Bills at plus 1.5. I think they're just going to beat the Ravens overall. I don't think it's going to be a close game. I think that the Bills can get it done in Buffalo. They have home field advantage, and we'll see how that goes. So those are 3 of my 4 picks. And then my 4th pick, which I can't give you the odds yet or tell you what the entire 4-pick parlay would pay out would be. But that would be the Eagles against the Rams. I think that the Eagles will beat the Rams at home in Philadelphia. That game is the third of 4 games throughout the weekend. That's the Sunday afternoon game at 2 p.m. If that pops up before the end of the recording, it just popped up. Hold on, stand by.
I feel like it should, just because the game's probably about to end.
Okay, so it just popped up. The odds for that game are negative 110, minus 110, which means all 4 picks in one parlay have a total odds of plus 1193, which means a $10 bet will win you $129.34, which includes your initial $10. So go out there and make some shitty bets, and hopefully you get some wins. Yeah, I made a little bit of money this weekend because I did a bunch of different picks through. I found another app, which I don't know if I could just throw their app names out here, but I used.
We're not sponsored by anybody, so
true. Yeah, true. I found an app called Odds Jam, and kind of did like a little side by side where I was in DraftKings on one side of my phone and I was in Odds Jam on the other. And what Odds Jam does is it kind of breaks down. You can break down, any statistic you want, whether it's team statistic or player statistic, and how if it's hit or not over the last 5, last 10, last 15, or last 20. And it just kind of shows you a trend. So it kind of gives you a little confidence in like, hey, this guy's scoring a goal in hockey, right? That was actually one of the things that I made money on was hockey. I don't bet hockey because I usually am like, oh, this team's going to cover the spread or whatever. And I, miss it by a mile. But I threw together a little like 6-pick parlay for NHL, which had like, it had like an over-under for the Ducks game. It had a couple of goal scorers, a couple of guys with assists, and it ended up hitting. And I've not watched a hockey game all year, so I know nothing about it. But I was like, all right, let's just see what happens. And I picked something and it worked. So I was like, okay, cool. So nice. If y'all are interested in that, that's how I'm starting to build my same game parlays for individual games. I like to do, spread games. I like to do individual player statistics and stuff like that. But yeah, the app is called Odds Jam. It's free to download, and it's definitely worth a look. So
all right, that's another one we got to work on getting a sponsorship through. All right,
yeah,
add that to the list.
So with that being said, moving into the 4 games this week, what game are you most excited for? You can only pick one. If you could only watch one game this weekend, what game would it be?
I know. I mentioned the 2 games I was most excited for earlier.
I know. I'm going to make you pick between one. I know it's going to be real tough for you to pry yourself away from your beloved Kansas City team, but
I honestly think it's going to be the Lions game. I really do. The Lions defense is kind of banged up. Even if they get some people back, they're still kind of banged up. Commanders offensively have been able to make shit happen. It's been impressive to watch. Obviously, they're 12-5. Detroit's 15-2, number one seed. Coming into Detroit, I think that game's and gonna be interesting, especially divisional doink. What the fuck are we gonna get this week?
Yeah.
So it'll that I think that's gonna be the game. I think that's gonna be most looking forward to, mostly because I'm hoping the Detroit Lions win as well and move on to the NFC Championship for the second year in a row. Hopefully, have a better outcome than they did last year. But that's next week's episode. We get to talk about whether I'm going to be happy or sad for that episode. Yeah, I think if I have to pick between the four and those two that I'm mainly excited about, it's definitely the Commanders and Detroit Lions.
Okay.
And I know yours is the Chiefs, so
so I do want to watch that game because I really think that the Texans might be able to pull some kind of upset magic on them. But that's not the game that I'm most excited for. Actually, the game that I am most excited for, I'm going to pick a different one than you because I do want to watch the Detroit Washington game. I think that's going to be an exciting game. But I think it's going to be the Buffalo and Baltimore game, to be completely honest. I think that's going to be a very high scoring game, and it's going to come down to Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen because you know that Josh Allen is just setting records left and right this year with passing and rushing. Lamar Jackson is just doing Lamar Jackson things. You got Derrick Henry on one side of the field. You got the old Brown Amari Cooper playing with Buffalo, who can do what he's been doing solid all year. And not only that, but it's the closest game that by the betting standards out of the rest of them. So the sports books thinks it's going to be a closer game than any other game.
Yeah, which I could definitely see. I mean, yeah, everyone's been talking about too the MVP race, and the two quarterbacks of each of those teams are this could potentially. I know the MVP is allegedly based on just a regular season performance, but I have a hard time believing that sometimes with some of the people that get picked. Aaron Rodgers, for example. So I think that could be the deciding factor as far as who does in fact win MVP is I think going to be the winner of that game. Regardless of how the rest of their season pans out, I think the winner of that game will be the MVP.
So you're saying it's between Daniels and Goff? Is that what you're going with? That's what I'm picking?
No, the Ravens. Ravens and Bills, smartass.
Okay, sorry. Okay,
the winner of the game that you picked is going to be.
I thought you were talking. I was like, that's why I had to ask because I was like, who are we talking about? Okay, all right. I'm tracking. Okay. I think it's already been decided, but I agree with you. I do think that they say it's based only on regular season performance, but if that's the case, then why do we wait till the end of the postseason to give out the honors?
Exactly.
So,
because we got to find something to do Pro Bowl week.
Right.
That's fucking why.
Right. So, but and then just a kind of a side note, I think they should push the Pro Bowl earlier in the year. They should move it up to like halfway through the season because, like they do with baseball, they have the All-Star break in the middle of the year. It's always puzzled me why they do that, where they have the Pro Bowl at the end of the year. Because, go ahead.
I mean, you do that, then are you just going to give everyone the same bye week?
So that's if you're going to give every team 2 bye weeks, then yeah, you should. That would be one of the two. Okay. But here's my other point to it. Now you've got, when it comes down to the Pro Bowl, you have the 2 best teams in the NFL not having their players play in the Pro Bowl. So you got players on the 2 best teams because you know that the Pro Bowl happens before the Super Bowl. So you already know who's going to the Super Bowl. The only 2 teams that aren't going to have players in there are the 2 best teams in the NFL. And arguably, that's the cream of the crop at the Pro Bowl that aren't going to show up at the Pro Bowl because they're playing in the Super Bowl. So why not let them play in both? And the only way to do that is by moving the Pro Bowl to midway in the year.
True, but then I mean, realistically, like, is anybody really? It's a flag football game at the end of the day.
That's true. They did change it to flag football, which okay, whatever. But
Like, yeah, I guess that's good, camaraderie, all that kind of stuff. But then, like what's the point? Even now, with it being where it's at now, I still don't fully understand the point of the Pro Bowl. To be honest, like back in the day, it was a chance for players who potentially were going to get released or cut or whatever, or contract negotiations to try to kind of get that extra little bit of like, okay, here, this is what I'm worth.
yeah,
Let me prove it and show it. And now it's more of a, hey, we're just gonna go around and play flag football and hope for the best, and then just kind of fuck around. So
but you don't really see that, at least not. And I'm more of a baseball nut than I am football, but you don't really see that a lot with the baseball side of things because you got guys that go to the All Star break and it's their last year of a contract and they end up becoming the All Star MVP, for example, 2 years ago. Um, with Elias Diaz, he was the All Star MVP, and he didn't get signed the year after. So it's tough because I agree with you. I think that's how it should be. If you go to the All Star, one, you're already great at your position. That's why you've made it there. But two, if you're able to walk out as like an All Star MVP, I mean, everybody should be looking at you to be like, I want that guy.
yeah,
Now, I will say the only potential argument against my case would be that in baseball, you only, if you're a pitcher, you only get maybe an inning to throw. If you're a batter, you may only get one or two at bats. You may only get an inning or two out in the field because there's so many all stars that play. So, but just making the roster itself is already a good enough achievement throughout your for one person's career, let alone if you make it multiple times throughout your career. I mean, that just shows how hard charge of a player you are, how good and how talented you really are. But that's beside the point. From say, I mean, it kind of coincides with the pro football Pro Bowl, right? You've got players that try to do it. Obviously, everybody tries to be a Pro Bowler, but not everybody can. But it's an achievement nonetheless just to make it. Let alone, you may be you may go unsigned the next year, but it just shows that you know you played really well. You did everything you needed to do, and you're just not fitting with a team right now. Maybe you fit with another team in the future, but hey, if anybody's willing to sign Jameis Winston, then I'm pretty sure that anybody who plays in a Pro Bowl should be on a roster. So
he says as his team signed James Winston this
yeah,
last year
we'll
and
get to that.
potentially
We'll
looking
get
to
to
doing
that
it
in a
again.
minute because we're gonna talk about draft picks here in a couple of minutes. But yeah,
Hey, what better time than the fucking present, my mans?
yeah.
Let's roll right the fuck into it then. All right, so we kind of briefly touched on it last week. We've all established now that the Titans have the number one draft pick. We'll do top three just because there's fucking 32 teams and we don't have time to go through the whole damn draft order. Maybe that'll be a podcast in the off season we eventually do, just because we'll have a lot of off time to kill. But top three: Titans, Browns, and Giants. Them being one of your teams. What Titans realistically? I mean, you sent the link for tankathon.com. I'll give them a little plug.
Yeah, I like
They
that just because
have
it's very. I like organization and colors. So this one has it's very easy for my very simple mind to follow.
they have old Colorado QB Shadur Sanders going number one to Tennessee. I personally, again, this is all opinion based, don't see that happening just because of the fact that they picked up a QB 2 years ago. But so let's say that they don't pick up Shadur, right? And they pick up, hell, let's say Cam Ward or literally whoever else, right? And that leaves, all right, cool, Cleveland Browns, you're on the clock. As a fan, what would you want to see?
So, man, I knew you were going to ask me this, and I'm not prepared to answer. Okay, my fan base wants to pick Shadur Sanders because you get a little bit of attitude, and you know how we love attitude with Baker Mayfield. We get a little bit of, maybe we get a little bit of involvement from Dad and Deion Sanders. Maybe he shows up to a couple of games. Maybe he involves himself in the coaching staff. Who knows? Whatever. I'm not drafting Shadur Sanders just on the potential that Deion Sanders may come help out the team, right?
Mm.
So the fan in me wants to pick Shadur Sanders because the Browns are really good at what's the word I'm looking for? Screwing up the
I
draft
was gonna say
picks.
fucking up.
Yeah. So, but we had a little bit of hope with our last first overall draft pick, which was Baker Mayfield. Now we're not first overall this time around. I'll clarify that. But the last time we picked a quarterback first round was Baker Mayfield, and it turned out to be the right decision for Cleveland. What followed was trying to get him offensive weapons, and that is what ultimately ended his tenure in Cleveland, which I'm still pretty pissed about. Now, if you're
It's
looking at
okay.
this at a statistical standpoint, which I hope that the front office does, because why else? You can see that Cam Ward, the other quarterback, and I mean, I think the only other quarterback projected to go in the first round altogether out of the 32 teams, Cam Ward is a better quarterback than Shadur Sanders. They are identical in height and weight. Cam Ward has almost 200 yards more passing, 2 more throwing passing touchdowns, 3 less interceptions. His percentage is a little lower, but his rating is significantly higher. So, out of those statistics, I would pick Cam Ward over Shadur Sanders. Um,
Interesting.
the reason being that I would pick Cam is because I think that Cleveland is looking at their players in the wrong light over the last couple of years. Their draft picks have not been, I don't want to say bad, but not a good fit, right? Because you get teams like, I know we just talked to, well, we didn't talk about, but they were just talking about it on the broadcast tonight for the Rams. You get teams like the Rams who can just draft really, really well, or the Lions, they can draft really, really well. The Browns are not one of those teams, and I think they need to change up their mindset to it. They picked Baker Mayfield because he was more of an on-field presence, a leader. He had a lot of that attitude behind him. I just don't think that that's something that we need right now. We do need it, just not right now. We need someone who can go out there, solidify that position for 4 years, get the job done, and we can build a young core around him or bring in veteran help to assist for maybe a year or two. And when I say veteran help, I mean like bringing in maybe one, veteran wide receiver or one veteran running back. And I also don't want it to be taken as a rebuild because Myles Garrett has made it very clear that he does not want to be in Cleveland during a rebuild. So if they end up going the route of rebuilding through quarterbacks and getting young receiving core, keeping what they have at the young receiving core, then we may end up losing Myles Garrett and that side of things too, which would hurt us even worse.
Yeah. Interesting.
And the last thing I'll talk about for the pick for that is that uh, Deshaun Watson has a torn Achilles again. So
Yep.
I truly think that he is done playing football in Cleveland. But we'll see because they just restructured his contract, so they have a lot of money to pay him this next
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. It's interesting too that at least my way of looking at it, not being a Cleveland Browns fan and not really having a dog in that fight for that team or that draft pick or anything. I don't know. We talked about it last week or the week before about college players giving up. Cam Ward gets that record in Miami for most passing touchdowns or whatever, and just quits on his team flat out. Um, to me, that's a sign of character. And again, this is my own opinion. Uh, it's not a good look. If I was a coach, a general manager, an owner, whatever, looking at that from the outside in, being like, okay, cool, like you did what you wanted to do, now you quit on the team, right? In a bowl game that they had the chance to very well win. Granted, I think it was like the Pop-Tart Bowl or some shit, but still.
Yeah.
And you quit. Okay, cool. So let's say you go out and pass for the most rookie yards in a season. Are you just gonna, at week, let's say 13, are you just gonna be like, yeah, I'm done? Like
Yeah,
I did what I wanted to do.
I can understand that argument. And I think I even when we talked about it last week, I was against it. And I am, like that quit on my team mentality is not something that we want. Um and I don't stand for it at all. But maybe that changes. Maybe that his mentality was, I have one more thing left to do. I'm in a game that I mean, dude, look at it too. You got uh bowl games are a dime a dozen now in college. Every game at the end of the season's a bowl game. So
That's true. But on the flip
whether
side of
this is
that, you can't sit there and call it like Cam Newton on his podcast said it a couple weeks, either a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I think it was actually talking about this exact thing too, just in general, that you can't call these college players student athletes anymore with the whole NIL deals. Like you're getting
no, you're
paid to
right.
do it. So
You're
like
absolutely right.
you're a professional at that point. If you're getting paid to do something, you're a professional, right?
Yeah,
So I didn't
that's
mean
a
to cut
valid
you off
point.
there, but
No, you're
you
right.
know,
I agree with you. Go ahead.
Ward's he's professional, making money technically off of this with an NIL deal that I'm assuming he has, right? Playing in Miami. And is willing to do that there. Granted, I mean, hell, I don't know what his NIL deals are all worth overall, but it might be more than, let's say, a rookie contract in the NFL. Granted, maybe not a top 2 pick in the NFL, but still a decent chunk of money. And you were still willing to just be like, fuck it, I'm done, right? So when coach tells you, hey, get your ass back in there, we're in a close game, getting ready to, that we could potentially win. Again, yeah, we talked about it at the Pop-Tart Bowl. They're going to throw a fucking Pop-Tart in a toaster at the end of it all, right? And sacrifice him. But, like, you're still getting paid. You still have a job to do, right? So, like, I don't know. I feel like there's a whole list of things wrong with that, at least for college football wise, that should be adjusted. But that's a conversation for a different day. But that would be my one key thing of like being worried about that. If they can't not I'll use the word contain. If they can't contain that in college, what makes you think that it's going to be any potentially different in pros?
Yeah. But that's the one thing that I've always looked at college as being different from pros is that you still have that freedom as a person to do whatever you want. Like you have the transfer portal. Now it's easier than ever to just pack up and say, I want to go play for Georgia or Oregon or whoever, right? And you may have a legitimate chance of being a starter there. So uh, I do think that there is a little bit of difference between pro football and an NIL deal in college football. One of the biggest things is, like you said, you're getting paid to play. And it kind of brought up to my point a second ago. Why don't the football players selected for the Pro Bowl have to play in the Pro Bowl if they're going to play in the Super Bowl? If they're allowed to back out of the Pro Bowl, then I don't think it's much different than a team, a guy, a college player saying, I'm going in for my record, I'm going in for this, I'm going in to do whatever. Or maybe they have a predetermined set of, you know, score that they have to meet before they can step out of the field. And just saying like I'm doing this to preserve my health for the draft, right?
Okay, so let's flip that then. So at that point, if right, let's say you go out, right, you're a Super Bowl team, right? You what normally would be in, you wouldn't play in, let's say, the Pro Bowl, right? You go out
Yeah.
in the Pro Bowl, right? Your team's relying on, let's say it's Saquon Barkley, right, on the Eagles, right? Let's say they go to the Super Bowl for whatever reason.
Shout out Kev.
Uh, okay, hope you're listening. Uh, and they go through, and let's say he plays in the Pro Bowl and tears his Achilles a week before the Super Bowl, or let's say even if we put it halfway through the season now, a lot of people are going to sit back and look at it and be like, what was the point of that?
Right.
There's a difference between going for at the end of at the end of a bowl game, nothing happens. It's the end of your season. Granted, yeah, if you're eligible to go play or to be draft eligible, then yeah, that would be your equivalent of like the Super Bowl in this scenario. But still, there's more games to play. Granted, there would be more games, unless Barkley were to retire or whatever in that scenario. But there's no other game at the end of that bowl game.
Yeah.
For the Pro Bowl, there's still one big game that matters, and it's the game.
Yeah. And what you just said of like getting hurt during that is kind of my the only excuse I would say that would make this acceptable in Cam Ward's situation. But you know, I am a diehard like for the team. Do it, do it for your team, no matter what kind of deal. But at the same time, too, like it's tough. That's kind of that teeter totter point. Now, if this was a regular season game, I would even argue that even if it was a regular season pro football game, it would carry more weight than a bowl game in college football. And the reason I say that is because after your tenure is up in college, they're gonna find another quarterback to take your spot. They're gonna do it in pro too. But the turnover rate for college is every year, every 2 years, right?
Mhm.
You look at some pro teams in the NFL are expecting to have the same quarterback for 10 years. You know, Dallas Cowboys, for example, Philadelphia Eagles, you know, teams like that, they're expecting to have the same quarterback year in, year out, year in, year out. So if you sit for a game, you're giving up on your team that you're going to have for the next 10 plus years versus you're sitting out for a bowl game for your college that you're preserving your health for the draft to go sit with that team for potentially 10 plus years. I think it's a little bit
Okay.
different. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I see what you're coming from at that
And I'm
point.
not, I'm not trying to excuse it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that I agree with him. I'm just, there's, in my mentality is that there's just a little bit more to it than it's a bowl game. And if it was playoffs, like college football playoffs, different, 100% different. You're going to be in it until you're out or you're hurt. But this is just what would you say, the Pop Tart Bowl? I don't even know what game it was, right? Like, who cares, right? Every half of the team, half the colleges in America have a chance at a bowl game now. But only 12
Yeah.
of them, or yeah, 12 of them have a chance at the playoffs. So,
True.
yeah, it's little sour taste for sure, but I think that was more of a business decision, if you will. That's what I'll call
Yeah,
it.
I guess. Yeah, I guess I can see that still, but I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just the way I'm looking at it. Of like, all right, you quit there. What else? When the going gets tough, or like you achieve what you want, are you going to go ahead and give up and quit too? But
Yeah,
I
and
don't
I'd
know.
like to see
Maybe.
if something was said beforehand, because if you can have, like I said, those predetermined objectives that you have to meet with your coaching staff and say, hey, I want to play until I get the record, and your coaching staff says you can play until you get the record, but if we're not winning, you're still going to play, or if we're not up by a certain amount of points, you're still going to play. And once they meet that, hey, we're up by so many, and you've gotten that record, you can pull yourself out of the game if you feel that you want to. But if we start losing and we dip down below that cushion, you're going back in kind of deal. I would, and I doubt that they'll ever talk about that. Maybe in the future, Cam Ward might, answer that question for us. Maybe come up on draft day, which is something that you and I should set up some time to do a live stream for the draft day
Yeah.
in April. But I don't know, maybe. But with that aside, I think that I do think that that's a good person to bring into Cleveland, statistic wise.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting take. Like I said, it's not having a dog in the fight. Just interesting to hear Browns fan on take on it.
Yeah, and
So
I'm looking at this. Sorry to cut you off real quick, but I'm looking at this
are you good?
list. It looks like one of your boys from ASU is projected to go to Carolina, to Terrio McMillan.
Arizona, not Arizona State. That's U of
Oh,
A.
it's not the same one. Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
nope. Two separate schools.
gotcha. Okay,
Um,
okay.
but yeah, because I saw it too, and I was like, and I was like, that's not him. There's nobody in the Arizona State even in the top 32. More than likely, Cam Scatterville, the running back, will get picked up probably like round 3 or 4. Hopefully, I'd like to see
Scadaboo.
him.
I mean, dude, I
Yeah,
loved watching him play.
I'd love to see
The
him get
only game I watched him
too.
play was the game y'all lost, but man,
But
that was good.
yeah, so I know we're running out of time, so we'll touch on a few more quick things. The Giants being one of them, because we did mention we'll talk about the top 3 draft
Okay.
picks. Giants kind of screwed themselves out of the number 1 pick a couple weeks ago with winning. I wish I would have had my buddy Nick on the podcast, who's a Giants fan this week, but he's not working, so that couldn't happen. Just to get his thoughts on it. But I mean, the team needs a quarterback. We've established this. There's really no, other than Ward and Sanders, there's really no big QBs left that I would say in this draft. Like you mentioned earlier, based on tankathon.com, there's no QB getting drafted after those two, 1 and 2. So
No.
the very thin draft class at QB this year, which leaves the Giants sitting at number 3 kind of hurting. So do they go through and pick up Travis Hunter at cornerback / wide receiver? I have a feeling the NFL is going to make him pick one of the, not NFL, but the team's going to make him pick one or the other with packages set up for one of the other, the other one that he doesn't pick. But
Yeah, I was looking through, trying to find another quarterback in the draft, and it looks like, according to this mock draft, it does look like they're planning on picking up Jalen Milroe in the second round, which is not a bad pick, but I would argue that Quinn Ewers is a better pick than Jalen Milroe, just based off of his history, not just his last year's performance, but the year before as well. But Quinn Ewers is actually projected to go third round for Vegas, which they're the other team that also need a quarterback. Yeah, we'll drop the link. I'll drop the link for this in the description, so that way y'all can see what we see and keep it updated. Maybe we can just keep using this in the next couple of weeks as we talk about the final draft.
As we start inching closer, and of course, every different website you look at has a different mock draft and everything like that. But yeah, we'll try to stick to one for the duration up until the draft, and yeah, maybe we'll either do a live stream the day of the draft during it and get everyone, get at least our takes on it, or do it the day before in preparations or something for it. We'll do something. We'll figure something out. We got 3 months to figure it out, so we'll definitely do something, make that happen.
I think that the Giants picking a quarterback second round is a must if they pick Travis Hunter. No, I don't. But I don't know.
So I could see him doing some dumb shit and trading from 3 to 1. I could see Giants doing some dumb shit like that.
Well, I mean, that would actually make a little bit more sense though. So, because there was another website that I looked at that had a little bit of a 3-way flop. It ended up moving the Browns up to first, the Giants to second, and moving the Tennessee Titans down to third. And then if that were the case, I think it was Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders goes to the Giants, and then Travis Hunter goes to the Titans, which makes sense for all three. Because like you said at the beginning of this draft talk, Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward going to Tennessee doesn't quite make sense because they drafted Will Levis. This will be his second full year. He was drafted in 23, so a second full year completed, now going into his third year. But, I mean, maybe they have plans to revamp that offense. Maybe they're not liking Will Levis, or they just want somebody as like a backup. Because, I just looked at their backups today. Who is their backup? God, it was
Mason Rudolph, isn't it?
Mason Rudolph. Yes, it was. Thank you. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's really nobody that you got as a backup. So, they pick a rookie to back him up. But then, I don't know. There's a lot we could go another half an hour talk about that shit. But maybe we'll save that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's we could do a special, like fucking 4 or 5 hour podcast on that one day. But today's not that episode. But
yeah, I'll put that in my comments. We'll talk about that in the future. I could put that in a script and we could talk about just Tennessee alone.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see what the Giants do at 3. I know, Giants fans obviously want a quarterback, and just that they gave up money wise, what they gave up for Daniel Jones just to let him go and go be a backup on the Vikings, who are now eliminated from the playoffs as well. So I think that's just kind of funny the way all of that kind of pans out. But I think the final thing we'll talk about on this episode today would be the I don't know how to word it. The Cowboys coaching carousel is now what I guess I'll start referring it to.
That was go ahead. I'll let you lead into that.
I'm assuming at this point everyone's got to have seen the headline that they're letting him go. They're supposedly having contract negotiations. He was supposed to have an interview last week from the Bears. The Bears requested it. Dallas said no. They're blocking him from doing that just to let him walk a week later over alleged contract discussion or disputes that they couldn't figure out how long it was going to be for. I don't know. It just seems weird. I'm not really 100% sure what the hell Jerry Jones is thinking in Dallas. Um, I don't know, man. It just seems weird how all that planned out. Maybe there's some obviously behind the scenes shit that we don't know about. What it's allegedly coming out is the fact that they couldn't come up with just how many years the contract was going to be for. I didn't hear that it was an issue over like how much he was going to get paid per year. It was the duration of the contract. I don't know if you've heard anything different, but
yeah. So that's what I'm reading is that it was the length because I guess they wanted to do. I guess McCarthy obviously wanted more of a long-term contract, and I think that there was just no trust. Like when you get when you start talking 1-year deals, there's no trust back and forth. Like it's just get what
you're a
we can out of
placeholder.
you. Exactly. And if you
Yeah,
do
you're
well, maybe we sign you for another couple years or someone else signs you for a couple years. And if you don't do well, then okay,
bye.
thanks for playing. See ya.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't know. I don't know if it had anything to do with the recent decline of the Cowboys' regular season winning percentage. McCarthy was ultimately he was five. It was a positive. He had a positive record, and I wouldn't necessarily say that they had a terrible season this year. They went 7-10, but they were also, I mean, covered with injuries. Dak Prescott, C.D. Lamb.
Yeah, but I
mean,
think too, you go into it, Jerry Jones, being the owner of the Cowboys, expecting, especially in where McCarthy's what would have been his 5th season, I think, with the team.
Yeah, this was
And
his 5th full season. Yeah.
so going into what would have been his 6th, and you haven't taken the team to the Super Bowl, especially last season, when you had a stacked defense, a stacked offensive line, and couldn't bring home the championship. You know what I mean? And then this year you kind of go through and all the players like, oh, this is, and you hear from Cowboys fans every single fucking year, this is our year, this is our year. And then you go through and you don't even break 500. And yeah, there's injuries and stuff, but I just think that gave both sides of the ball kind of just a bad taste in their mouth. McCarthy probably just the fact that like, hey, we're gonna, Jerry Jones came on the offseason, hey, we're gonna hit the offseason hard, we're gonna pick up people, and they did nothing at all. Granted, I don't know how much of the offseason stuff was, Jerry Jones to blame specifically compared to like Mike McCarthy or who had more pull. Obviously, the owner does, but who was making most of those decisions for as far as the betterment of the franchise? But
Yeah.
So that probably pissed McCarthy off if Jones had more input on it, or vice versa. If McCarthy had input on it and they didn't do anything, that probably pissed off Jerry Jones.
Yeah, but it seemed though that there was that desire from the Cowboys to retain Mike McCarthy because, like you said, they didn't let him interview. So I feel like it wasn't like a hidden message of like, hey, we're gonna keep you from interviewing with other teams and then fire you because we want to fuck you over. I don't think that was the intent. I think
it just looks weird though. Like,
I mean, in all honesty, too, just because Mike McCarthy's out, he didn't. From what I'm reading, he wasn't fired. His contract expired.
Exactly. It was kind of a mutual decision. He could walk.
Right. So, but that also leads me to believe that there may be an opportunity for him to come back if they are able to agree on a contract for.
The only way I could see him coming back at this point with the way it sits right now, and granted I could be horribly fucking wrong, which chances are I probably am, would be if another team doesn't offer him a contract and money. Like the Bears had coaching jobs opening up. I'm trying to think of who else has a fucking coaching job opening. Saints, more than likely. The Raiders coaching job.
The Jets still have an interim coach. The Raiders, yeah.
So like there's 4 or 5, 6 teams out there that, just off the top of my head real quick, that for sure need a new head coach.
Yeah.
And then now with Dallas opening up, and I was talking about Deion Sanders earlier at Colorado with the Sun, there's there's talks heating up that Deion Sanders might possibly go be the coach of the Cowboys next. So that's interesting to keep an eye on over the next couple weeks and months as we get closer into the new football year, because obviously you got to have a new head coach, preferably before the start of the new season, and I think it's the middle to the end of March is when the new like league year starts. So you want a head coach there for the draft. So that I think that'll be interesting to see and pans out. So yeah, I have a hard time thinking McCarthy's going to come back. Like, you're right, he could. It's especially if it wasn't, hey, you were fired. It was all right, cool, the end of your contract. Let's see if we can figure something out. We'll let you go talk to teams in the meantime and kind of compare offers. But I don't know. I just have a hard time thinking that's going to end up being the case, just because, like, if you really wanted to sign him that bad, you would have made it happen.
Right, exactly, and that's where I think they were kind of on that. We want to sign you, but you're not worth what you think you're worth. We think you're worth a little less, but we still want you. Kind of mentality kind of sets in.
Yeah, I mean, just weird.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that over the next couple of months, definitely in the next month or so, we'll have a definitive answer on whether he goes back to Chicago, whether he goes back to Dallas or ends up going to a place like Chicago or New Orleans, or doesn't get a job at all. Who knows?
Yeah. But
who was it though that just picked up Mike Vrabel?
Patriots, because they fucking fired John Mayo after 2 weeks after that. They were like, yeah, no, he's our guy going forward. We have a lot of trust in him. And then they're like barring a giant collapse. And then I didn't really see much of a giant collapse. And then they're like, yeah, no, you're going to go ahead and fire him. But I guess they said that they picked out, they feel that they made him a head coach sooner than what they should have, is what I ended up seeing that came out. But I don't know. It's kind of cop out to me to be like, yeah, we fucked up drafting not drafting, but signing him as our head coach. So he's a good coach. He just needs potential. I don't know. It just seems like a fucking weird cop out by the Patriots. But
yeah, I think they're kind of just all in disarray. But we'll get into that another day too.
So that's definitely another whole day's podcast we could go over. But
yeah,
I think that's about the end of the road for this episode. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I got. Yeah, we're good. We are good, ready to go for next week in divisional football.
Yes, sir. We as usual, Zach, it's been fun. Thanks for coming out and doing this a couple days after surgery. Hope all went well with that.
Yeah, my arm hurts, but
yeah, welcome to the world of surgically repaired shoulders. It's fun. Great.
Yeah, I don't ever want to do it again. So
yeah.
But yeah, man, it's been great. Thanks for doing this with me.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see you back next week after the 4 divisional games. We will have 4 teams remaining moving on, and then one more week left to decide who goes to the Super Bowl. So
yes,
to the viewers out there, thank you all for sticking around with us so far. We have a couple more podcasts left before the Super Bowl, and we'll just kind of be talking about some bets and some draft picks and some winners and losers.
Any other random news that happens?
Yeah, any just kind of cool stuff. Kind of fill some time every week. But we appreciate your support as always. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. We are on YouTube and Spotify, and if you have any questions for us or comments, feel free to note them down in the comments below, and we'll answer them on stream next go around. But that's all I have this week. Sully, thanks again, and we'll catch you all next week.
Goodbye.